Hi everyone, it's Kurt here again, and today I'm going to be talking about communicative language teaching in context and also communicative language teaching principles. So this builds off of what I talked about last time in the historical teaching methods, where we started at the very beginning, the grammar translation method, and more historical approaches where the focus was more on memorizing vocabulary, translating, and then I tried to show at the end how we saw the need for more communication practice and learning in class. So now we're going to look at some different CLT approaches, as well as the key principles for teachers to keep in mind in their own classrooms. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so first of all, here we're looking at communicative competence. So if we want to improve our students' ability to communicate, at first we have to define what does that mean to be communicatively competent. So to be competent at communication. And there are four areas according to Knale and Swain. They're grammatical. So this is knowledge of and ability to use the forms of language. There's discourse knowledge, which is the knowledge of and ability to comprehend and produce stretches of language across sentences, both oral and written. So being able to carry on a conversation longer than just a few words at a time. There's also social linguistic knowledge, which applies to social cultural context to communicate. So that includes communicators' roles, the information that they share, and the function of the communication act. So basically, it's being able to use the language appropriately to communicate with someone, depending on who you're talking to and where you are. Okay, and the last one is strategic knowledge. This is the use of verbal, nonverbal tactics to accomplish a communicative goal. And this also includes compensation for breakdowns. You get stuck, what do? You can't find the word, what do? If you're in Taiwan and you're talking to your friend, of course, the easiest strategy is just to use Chinese and talk to each other. But how about if you're abroad and you don't share the same first language? What will you do when you get stuck? Okay, now, first of all, we're going to look at the characteristics of communicative language teaching. Okay, so we're going to start broad, and then we'll look at a few specific methods that can be used in the classroom. Now, for today's video, I'm going to try to go fast, so I'm not going to go very deep on all of these. These are things we will discuss in class, and maybe you need to do a little bit of reading on your own to learn more about these particular methods. Okay, so the overall goals of CLT is to have a focus on all of the components of communicative competence. So not just grammar knowledge, which is very common here in Taiwan. It should also be discourse, social linguistic, and strategic knowledge. There needs to be a relationship of form and function. So in traditional classrooms, the focus has been more on form, being grammatically correct, using the right sentence structure. But we need to consider the function as well. We need to use language for meaningful purposes. Okay, moving on. Fluency and accuracy. So these are complementary. We can't just focus on accuracy. We have to also balance it with fluency. And the teacher's role is to give feedback on both, not just the accuracy. And there should be a focus on real-world context. So students are able to use the language outside of the classroom. That means the classroom tasks must equip students with communication skills. Remember, in class, I talked about the difference between EFL and ESL, where in Taiwan, it's an EFL context because students do not have many opportunities to use English, outside of the classroom. And so you are the main source in the classroom. These tasks that you give them, they have to be able to practice real use of English, not just practice for the tests. Okay, and then there's autonomy and strategic involvement. So students focus on learning process through raising awareness of their own styles of learning and through development of appropriate strategies for production and comprehension. It's all about creating autonomous learners that are capable of learning outside of the classroom as well. Okay, so in a CLT classroom, the teacher and student role, of course, will change. It's not going to be like the traditional classroom that's teacher dominated. Now the teacher is a facilitator and a guide, not necessarily an all-knowing font of knowledge. And for students, they need to be active participants in their own learning process. And it's up to the teacher to teach them how to do that when they're unsure. Okay, so there are general approaches. So these 6 different approaches for CLT, they could have many different types of more direct or more specific teaching methods that you could use. But in general, these can be used for CLT classrooms. So the first one is learner-centered instruction. The second one is task-based language teaching or learning. The third is theme-based instruction. Fourth is experiential or project-based learning, strategies-based instruction, and interactive language teaching. So I'm going to very quickly go through each one. So in learner-centered instruction, the focus is on the learner's needs and characteristics. So at its core, the teacher is trying to design a classroom that best meets what the students need and best meets who they are. So if you think about it, our students in Taiwan, yes, they need to pass the exams. So that has to be a part of the course. But it's also about being able to use English when they leave the classroom. And so we need to also provide this type of opportunity for them to learn. Teacher needs to understand the differences between students. You can't lump them all together as one group. The curriculum, this is tough, but it can be matched to their learning styles and preferences. So you got to find out who your students are, how they thrive, and try to design based on their abilities. The classroom should be supportive, non-fearful, non-defensive. You need to create that type of atmosphere where students feel comfortable to try. And if possible, you try to give students a choice or give them control over certain things. And we'll talk about that more in later areas and sections. Okay, the second one is task-based language instruction. Now, this is something that we may look at later on, but in general, students carry out a task in the classroom, and the focus here is on using language to complete the task. It's not necessarily about focusing on using the correct language, but successfully using the language in order to complete the task given by the teacher. So in class, this could cover all of the skills: reading, writing, listening, speaking, grammar, doesn't matter. But the teacher will give students a task, and they will work together or they'll work on their own to complete it using the target language. So effective tasks, meaning is primary. You focus on the meaning, not the grammar. Grammar can come later, but at first it's a focus on meaning. There should be some communication problem to solve. There should be an authentic scenario, a relationship to comparable real-world activities. And the assessment of the task is in terms of the outcome, not on how accurate the students were in the language that they used. Okay, the characteristics of task-based language instruction. The tasks will move learners past forms of language to the real-world context, the real-world usage, which is what we want. They contribute to communicative goals, which is what we want. You, as a teacher, have to carefully design how it runs in the task that you choose so that it actually matches what you want. You give the students very clear objectives, and these objectives need to be measurable by the teacher. We will talk about this in future lessons. And the tasks need to create an authentic problem that students will solve on their own or together with other students. Okay, theme-based instruction. Now these are all a little bit similar. There is some overlap, but this type of syllabus or course that you want to design, it's organized around a meaningful situation or topic. They will cover certain subjects, but still focus on language forms. So you're not just like teaching science or something like that. You choose a theme, you choose a topic that students are interested in, but you still are focusing on the English language or whatever language you're teaching. But what's good about them is that they engage curiosity and motivation, because now you're not just taking the same old boring topic from the textbook. You are designing a course around their interests. And this is how you can make it student-centered, is by getting feedback from the students. What do they like? What do they want to learn about? You can still make sure they learn the appropriate language. For example, if the target word is situation, you need to make sure that students learn the word situation. It doesn't matter what the topic or the theme is, as long as they learn that word. But you can choose a topic that you know they're going to be interested in. Okay, you can also have real life scenarios here. So if you're connecting it to, like, TV shows that they watch or video games that they play, this is like a real life usage of the language. And it's integrated learning. So you're integrating the different skills and different knowledge. Okay, the next one is experiential and project-based learning. It's a little bit similar to task-based, in that in project-based, you are giving some kind of real-world problem for them to solve or question to answer, but it's still a little bit different. So in this case, you're giving students concrete experiences in which they must use language to fill the objectives. So this type of model will contextualize language. You're learning the language as you use it, which is different from when you learn from the textbook. If you learn a grammar form in the textbook, you can memorize the rule, you can probably answer all the questions in the textbook, but do you know how to really use it outside of the classroom? Maybe, maybe not, because you didn't use it in a real life situation. So this type of learning actually allows students to learn as they're using it, which can be more effective. And it integrates skills as well. So you're talking about listening, speaking, reading, writing, all of them together at the same time. And again, it's authentic, real world purposes or scenarios, things that students may do outside of the classroom. So here are some examples. You can give them hands-on projects like a science experiment or something like that. You can take students on field trips. You can do research projects. You could have dinner groups, creative video advertising a product. The list goes on and on and on, giving them some type of project or experience. Okay, next one is strategies-based instruction. So here you are actually focusing your instruction on building up their strategic autonomy, teaching them how to use strategies as they learn. So your goal here is to create independent learners. They have to learn what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how do I overcome my weaknesses, rather than just relying on the teacher telling them all the time, do this, do that, do this, do that. They learn how to do it on their own. So 3 steps for this type of instruction. The first is to stimulate their awareness with the preferred learning style. So one way to do that is, first of all, let them figure out what their preferred learning styles are, and then try to connect their learning styles to strategies that actually work in the situation in which they're learning. And you can provide extra class assistance for learners as well. Okay, next one is interactive language teaching. So in this case, you are really focusing on something called scaffolding, in which students help each other, they work together, they're constantly interacting, just like in the real world when we are talking about communication. So you utilize pair and group work a lot. You give them authentic language input in authentic contexts. Meaningful language production, meaningful communication. They perform tasks to prepare them for language use outside of the classroom. practice speaking in real conversations, and they write to real audiences. So again, it's that idea of preparing students to use the language outside of the classroom. Now, a lot of teachers make the mistake of thinking, if I do this type of instruction, we're not focusing on the language. They're not going to improve their grammar, the vocabulary. But it's just not true, because when you are working together with a partner or a group, and let's say you need to write a letter or you need to make a presentation, you must focus on the language, because you don't want to make a mistake, and you will help each other to find the right word or the right grammar structure. And if you don't know, you ask the teacher or you look online. Students must be pushed to do this on their own in this type of classroom. Okay, now those were the general approaches for CLT, and now here are some specific ones. So the first one is content-based language teaching. The second is immersion and sheltered models. Third is bilingual education. Fourth is workplace and vocational L2 instruction. The fifth one is language for specific purposes, and sixth is corpus-based teaching. I'm going to fly through these ones pretty fast, because some of them we'll talk about later, and some of them are not as appropriate is the wrong word, but maybe you will not be teaching in these type of scenarios in the future, but it's just good that you know that these type of approaches are out there as well. Okay, so the first one is content-based language teaching. It's an umbrella term that covers all approaches that mix a focus on language teaching with content. The form and sequence of language content is dictated by the content material. Now, a very simple example is, maybe I'm teaching English, but I don't want to use the regular textbook, or the topics are too boring. So what I do is I bring in maybe a science unit. So I teach them the science material in English, but my focus as a teacher is not so much on learning the actual science. It's still on improving their English ability. So I'm still focused on grammar, I'm still focused on vocabulary, but I bring in content rather than just your typical textbook with the grammar, vocabulary, reading type sections in it. So there are pros and challenges, I will say. The pros are that it can increase students' intrinsic motivation and empowerment. They're learning something else. It improves their linguistic ability. But challenges for teachers is that, first of all, you need new materials. You don't have a lot of prepared materials that can allow you to do this. So you spend a lot of time creating your own stuff. And training for teachers. So it's not as easy for an English teacher to start teaching a different subject. And we're going to talk all about this when we get to the bilingual education part later. Okay, another one is immersion and sheltered models. So these are different ways of learning foreign language. Immersion is when the majority of subject matter content is delivered by the second language, and they're intensive programs that occur all in the L2. So a local example is, for example, like the Taipei American School or the Kaohsiung American School. Taiwanese students, or from other countries, but we'll stick with Taiwanese, they go to the Kaohsiung American School in order to learn English, and they learn all of the subjects in English: math, science, computers, all of it. But the focus is not only on improving their English, it's also learning the subject matter. So basically you're just thrown into an English environment. Now, a sheltered model is something different. This is deliberate separation of L2 students or foreign language students from native speakers so that they can learn the content at a different level. So if you think about it, if you grew up in Taiwan and let's say you had a very average or maybe not so strong ability in English, and let's say you're in junior high school already, but you have to move to America. If you go into an American junior high school, it's very unlikely that you will be able to thrive in the classes because all of the subjects are in 100% English. And so they will have separate classes for these L2 students where maybe the level will be a little bit lower so that students who are newer can actually catch on and hopefully can improve enough that you can join the native speakers as well. Okay, then we have bilingual education. I mentioned in class that this will be an entire section on its own later, but just briefly is when you use two languages in classroom instruction for the same students, so they get instruction in both languages. Now in Taiwan, we always talk about English, 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 but bilingual education by definition means both languages, Mandarin and English at the same time. Now the proportion, how much you use English, how much you use Chinese, that depends on everything. What's the goal of the school? What's the goal of the country? What are the needs? Political issues, there's all kinds of issues. How much you need to prepare for the entrance exams. So it's not so simple to say, oh, 50-50 or 60-40. These answers are not very helpful. And if you look at bilingual education around the world, there are so many different types. So it's hard to just give one basic definition. Okay, then we have workplace and vocational L2 instruction. So in these type of environments, you're teaching the English or whatever language specifically geared toward the job or area that you're going to go to. So if you're going to work in an airport, you learn a lot of airport English. Very simple example. It's to prepare students for the workplace. And then we also have language for specific purposes, which is very similar to the workplace, but this one is more about study. So you're going to acquire the knowledge and the linguistic ability in your field. So if you're going to be a doctor, it's all about learning medical language. You read medical textbooks, you learn all of the vocabulary needed. That allows you to join this community. So you can see there's some overlap between language for specific purposes and the workplace or vocational L2 classes. Okay, then the last one is corpus-based teaching. So this is basically a computerized approach to linguistic research that stores and analyzes written and spoken text. So you can go online, for example, if you want to search, okay, how do you use the phrase, off the top of my head, now my brain's going empty on me just as I have to come up with something off the top of my head. Let's say it's the phrase get up, and you want to know what are the different ways that get up is used by native speakers. So you can search get up, and then it'll show you hundreds or thousands of different examples of how that's used. And you can do it in terms of syntax, lexicon, discourse, different varieties of English. So you could say American English, Canadian English, British English, different genres, different styles, and so on and so forth. What's good about this way is that you can get genuine text and samples of language, and you can use them in the classroom. But this also assumes that you have access to this type of corpora. Okay, so the last section today is about the CLT principles. So there are 6 key principles that I want to talk about today, and they're on the screen right now. So let me quickly go through them. These are very, very important that they happen in a CLT classroom, and the teacher is responsible for helping students get to be successful in these areas. So the first one is automaticity. This is a progression from control of a few forms to mastery of many items. It's the development of fluency aided by long-term, meaningful, authentic opportunities to practice the language. So I'll give you an example. This is more of a practical example. If you think back to the very first time you learned how to ride a bicycle, whoever taught you probably said, okay, here we go. I'm going to hold you. You have to keep your hands on the handlebars. Make sure you look forward. Don't look down. You have to keep pedaling your feet. Can't stop your feet. And make sure you keep your balance. So there are many things going through a person's brain at that time. And probably the first time you tried, you probably fell down or almost fell down. But I doubt that it went very smoothly. Maybe you looked down and crashed into a tree. Or maybe you forgot to pedal your feet, so you just stopped. Or maybe your balance was bad. Or maybe you took your hands off. Hopefully not, but who knows? But you keep doing it again and again and again. And then we get to today, when you ride a bicycle, I'm sure you don't even think about those things. You just get on and ride. It's the same with language. Maybe in the very beginning, you have a few phrases that are in your memory. But over time, the more you use it, the more you practice, you start to store these longer stretches and more forms. And so when someone asks you a question or you see something, it comes out very fast and very fluently. This is automaticity. You don't need to plan. You don't need to think. The language just comes out. This is what we're hoping for. So how can you get it? Well, you need a lot of classroom activity that's focused on the use of language for real purposes. Do not overwhelm your students with a focus on form. And this is what happens in junior high school and senior high school here in Taiwan, is the focus is almost always on the form rather than using it. Students should always notice the mistakes they make, and they should be encouraged to self-correct, because if you're self-correcting in your own brain, what you're doing is you're actually organizing all the vocabulary, all the grammatical forms into ways that will help you be more accurate and more fluent in the future. You need fluency activities. As I said, it can't just be about accuracy. And then, of course, patience and time. It takes a long time to become automatic or to have automaticity. Okay, the second one is transfer. So basically, learners need to make connections between what they already know, the skills that they have, and the emotions that they have, and the new content that they're going to learn. It can't just be something they've never ever felt or heard or seen before. You want to always try to connect everything together, past knowledge with new knowledge together. So how can you do that? You should build activities around your students' characteristics. Like I said, student-centered learning. When you introduce new material, always review the previously learned material through brainstorming activities and try to show the connection between it. Connect what students are learning to other skills, such as reading or writing, and stay away from rote learning, memorization. This is not as useful. You're not actually thinking about the world around you when you're just memorizing lists. Okay, the next one is reward. So as we know, people generally like to get some kind of reward for their actions. I do something, I want something. Now we have two different types that we're looking at today. And one is called intrinsic motivation and the other is extrinsic. So let me talk about those briefly. So extrinsic motivation is student behavior that's based on an expected reward from an outside party. So here are some classroom examples. I study for the test because I want my parents to be happy. I study for the test because I want to get some money by getting the highest score. I study for the test because I don't want my parents to scold me or hit me for getting a bad score. But intrinsic motivation is when the behavior comes from your own desire to succeed or achieve something. So you study for the test because you want to succeed. I play the game in class because I want to make myself proud. I don't care what everybody else thinks. I want to be happy with what I do. And research shows that both are needed, but intrinsic motivation can lead to more deeper learning and better long-term memory gains as well. So how can you promote it? Always give praise and encouragement to your students. Try not to be so negative about what they're always doing wrong. Show them what they're doing right. This will actually, even though that is some kind of extrinsic motivation, it will turn into intrinsic because they will feel proud of what they're doing. Use the energy of cooperative group work. Encourage students to praise and support each other. And we'll talk about this in class, how you can do that. Always have enthusiasm and excitement. If you show them, especially you, because you are just like them, you're Taiwanese, you're teaching English. and look how excited you are about using English. And then maybe they will also be excited about it. Show students the intrinsic long-term rewards of learning English. Give your students some choices, like I said, and encourage them to discover rules and principles by themselves. If students figure something out on their own, it's really meaningful to say, hey, I did that by myself. It's just like anytime you use another language that you're learning, and maybe you have to go speak English to someone who doesn't speak Chinese. Maybe you go to another country, or maybe you meet a foreigner in Taiwan, or whatever the case. And you go talk to them and you're really scared, but you do it and you're successful. That feeling inside is very, very good, because now you realize I can do it and I want to do it again. It's a great way to have this type of intrinsic motivation. Okay, the next principle is self-regulation. So students should become autonomous learners who regulate their own learning and progress. So how can you do that? Help them through guided practice and strategy training. Give them activities that allow creativity. Encourage them to set their own goals at the beginning of the semester, the beginning of the year. Help students become aware of their own preferences and styles and strengths and weaknesses. Once you know what your weaknesses are, most people will want to try to overcome them, or at least deal with them. Share with your students how you learn the language. What are your secrets? Let students practice in pair and group work and other interactive activities. Praise them for trying language that's a little bit beyond their ability. Even if they get it wrong, they tried. That's a big deal. And give them some suggestions. How can they practice English when they leave the classroom? Show them some websites. Give them more choices so that they can actually improve on their own. Okay, next one is identity and investment. So students should view themselves as part of the English learning community, and they should be invested in fitting in and thriving, which can be tricky because some students don't want to be a part of the English learning community. They will put their hand up and say, I don't like English and I don't want to learn it. So, you have to find a way to get them interested and find out what they like, and try to make it applicable to their lives if possible. So always have a supportive attitude. Give them credit for abilities and talents they have, even if their grammar is really weak. Find out what they're good at and praise them for that. Remember the fragility of your students, especially when they do something wrong in class. At the junior and senior high school level, students do not like to be embarrassed in front of their friends. And so you have to be really careful with the way that you scold them, or the things that you say. Oh, your English is so bad. Never say stuff like that. Figure out and think about their identity development in the decisions who you call on, and what kind of corrective feedback you give, and how to put groups and pairs together, and how tough you are on a student. Even though we are supposed to be fair and even for all students in class, some students need to be pushed and some don't like to be pushed. Some can take the criticism and others cannot. And you need to learn that so that you don't kill someone's learning motivation just because you gave the wrong type of feedback. And give them opportunities to make choice, like I said. Okay, this is the last one, which is interaction. So as we should know in a communicative language teaching classroom, interaction is the basis of foreign language learning. Learners are engaged in enhancing their own communicative abilities and socially constructing their identities through collaboration and negotiation. The primary role of the teacher is to scaffold the learner's development within a community of practice. So your job is to help them get to higher levels while they're using the language. So we're going to talk about interaction a lot throughout the semester, but first of all, you have to give them lots of verbal and nonverbal assurances. Smile, nod your head, thumbs up, okays, those are good too. Sequence the techniques in class from easier to more difficult. That allows all of the students to participate. Always have that supportive atmosphere in the classroom. Don't allow other students to be non-supportive, and you have to be supportive yourself, even when it's hard. Provide reasonable challenges. Don't make everything too easy. Don't make anything too hard. Help students understand what a calculated risk is and respond to their attempts to communicate with positive affirmation. If they try to talk to you in English, never start with oh, that was wrong. Always show them how happy you are that they tried to use English with you. You will be surprised. The more you use English with them, many of them will start to talk to you in English as well. And that's the time when you need to be very supportive, smile, and you will notice that they will interact a lot more after that. Okay, everybody, that is it for today's video. I hope you all are doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.